Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. We're going to wait a couple of minutes, let people join us, and then we'll get started. Okay, so welcome, everybody. This is Sharing Their Stories, the Diary of Yitskhok Rudashevski. We are Teach the Shoah, and we are here with YIVO. And I want to introduce a couple of people to you really quickly. First, Lynn Feldman, the Teach the Shoah Director of Holocaust Scholarship and General Manager, who is co-hosting this with me. Lynn, say hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good evening.
Secondly, I want to introduce Shelley Freeman. She is the Chief of Staff for YIVO. She'll be joining us on the YIVO side. Shelley, say hello.
Hi, everyone.
And Karolina Ziolkowski, who is the Director of Digital and the Chief Curator of YIVO's Bruce and Francesca Cernia Slovin Online Museum that we are going to be talking about today. Karolina, say hi.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you.
So thank you all for being here, and let's get started. So, slides. So, like I said, we are Teach the Shoah. For those of you who don't know, Teach the Shoah is a global nonprofit based online, and our mission is to teach people to tell testimony-based stories, to build empathy and personal connection, to connect people of all generations, all backgrounds, to the stories and the lessons of the Holocaust. We do a number of different kinds of things. We do storyteller training. We have a storyteller bureau that gets storytellers out into the world. We do storytelling programs like this one, and we do Holocaust commemorations. You can find out all kinds of things about us at our website, teachtheshoah.org, and you'll see some of what we do today. Shelley, you want to tell us a little bit about YIVO?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Shelley Freeman, and as Deborah said, I'm the Chief of Staff at YIVO. YIVO, it's actually a special year for us. YIVO was founded in 1925 in Vilna, Poland, now Vilnius, Lithuania. And if you do the math, it's our 100-year anniversary, which is quite significant because it's the only library and archive of its kind to have survived the Holocaust. So it was founded by intellectuals, scholars, academics that wanted to teach, study, preserve, perpetuate Jewish life in all its forms, you know, political, religious, social, artistic. So they started to collect the everydayness of life, of Jewish life, wherever it occurred in the world. And today we have an archive of 24 million artifacts which show what life was like. And it's everything from the diary of Theodore Herzl to the, letters, to the mundane, which tell us so much about what life was like They also had the mission to uplift the Yiddish language because if you can imagine, it was spoken in various shtetls, various different locations with a different sort of dialect. So they provided a standardized academic standard for the Yiddish language, which still holds true to this day. And also importantly, vis-a-vis Teach the Shoah, YIVO also has the largest collection of primary source Holocaust materials in the world, second only to Yad Vashem in Israel, which has more. And as you'll hear from Carolina, we've launched an online museum back in 2020. The first one was about the story of Beth Epstein, and the second one is the story of Yitskhok Rudashevski. We've had both of their autobiographies and diaries that have been part of our incredible collections. So I'll end there, and I'll be back on for Q&A at the end if you have any questions about YIVO or anything like that. So thank you and enjoy today's session.
Thank you, Shelley. Quick content reminder, we always do this. We know you're all here for a Holocaust program. These are Holocaust stories. That means they are difficult. And if at any point you find that you need to step out, take care of you first, we will understand. So, Carolina, would you introduce us to Yitskhok?
Yes, of course. So Yitskhok Rudashevski was born December 10th, 1927 in Vilna, Poland. Now Vilna is Lithuania. His father was a typesetter for the Vilna Tag, the Jewish daily paper. His mother was a seamstress. We know what happened with him and his story because when he was forced to move into the ghetto with his family, he wrote a diary starting at the age of 13. And he kept his diary throughout his time at the ghetto. And his diary was found after the war by his cousins for Voloshin. They were hiding in a ghetto, in an attic in Vilnius. And she was only the only member of the family who survived. And after the Soviets entered Vilna, she was able to go back to their hiding place to, I guess, was trying to see if anyone would be there or anything. And she found the diary there. So she gave this diary to Avram Sutzkever, who was Rudashevski's mentor, writing mentor at the time. He was a poet. And Sutzkever sent the diary to YIVO in New York sometime between 46 and 48. We don't know exactly when he sent it here, but it is here in New York. So like I said, she was the only survivor in Yitskhok, and the entire family were murdered at Ponar.
Thank you, Carolina. So let us move on to our story, and I'll turn it over to Lynn to lead this section of it.
Thank you. So I'd like to reintroduce Dr. Deborah Fripp, our co-founder of Teach the Shoah and our storyteller for this evening. A little anecdote is that the story of Yitskhok was the first story that Deborah told at Teach the Shoah, and this is a newer version of that story as the new publication of the diary has made Deborah as a storyteller rethink the way she tells that story. And I'm very proud to hand this part over to Deborah. Please refrain from using the chat during the telling, but afterwards, please do feel free to write any comments and appreciations. Deborah, whenever you're ready.
September 6th, 1941. I am standing in the courtyard of my house. At my feet, a bundle with everything I'm taking with me, everything I own. Behind me, the house is a wreck, filled with things I'm leaving behind, things that were important to me. In front of me, the street is filled with people, a mass of people, Jews being herded into the ghetto, carrying everything they own, their lives, in bundles. We join the line. I put my bundle on my shoulders. It's really heavy. It cuts into my shoulders. In front of me, a woman is carrying a bundle that is so heavy it bows her over. From the back, a small stream of rice trickles onto the street. It starts to rain. I am so tired. I am so tired, I can't even think. I can't think about what I'm losing, my home, my freedom, what's being stolen from me, the streets of Vilna. I can't think. I can only trudge along behind, within all these people until the mass of people pushes me through the gate and into the ghetto. September 7th, 1941. In addition to the four of us, there are 11 other people staying in this little teeny apartment. I didn't sleep at all last night. I run out into the streets of the ghetto. There are so many people. There are so many people. It's hard to push your way through. I feel as if I'm in a box. There is no air to breathe. Everywhere you go, you encounter a gate that hems you in. Trapped. October, November 1941, I don't even know what day it is. There was another action in the ghetto. The police, the Lithuanians, the Germans, they come in, they wreak havoc, they destroy things, and they take people away, and you never see them again. They've been happening constantly. We've been hiding in this bunker in the courtyard of the apartment where we live. But this time, my mother was able to get a yellow pass. It's a ticket that workers can get that allows them to be in the second ghetto, the one where the workers live, where the actions don't happen. And you can write down the names of your family that you're going to take with you. So we took this yellow pass and we went to the gate. But when we got to the gate, the guard at the gate said that old people were not allowed in the second ghetto. And even though her name was on the ticket, Grandma couldn't come with us. We didn't know what to do. We were desperate. Grandma couldn't get back into the bunker. It was shut tight, and we didn't know what to do. But the line kept pushing us forward, and finally we just left. We ran. We left her behind. We saved ourselves. I'll never forget. She reached out to us. Take me with you. Three days later, we returned to the first ghetto to find it destroyed. Our apartment torn up and grandma gone. I feel so helpless. They murder us by the thousands, and we can do nothing. October 5th, 1942. After more than a year in the ghetto, it's finally happened. We finally made it. School opened in the ghetto today. And the club opened. Finally, we have something to do other than cooking and cleaning. We're going to have classes in math and history and language. We're going to have circles at the club, literary circles and natural science circles. My friends and I, we are so happy. Our lives are going to be different now. November 2nd, 1942. We had the most amazing meeting of the literary circle at the club today. The poet Avraham Sutzkever came over from YIVO and talked to us about Yiddish poetry. We decided that we're going to have two branches of the literary circle. One about Yiddish poetry and one about ghetto folklore. These sayings and curses and jokes and new words and stories that are already becoming legend, that are developing in the ghetto. They are written in blood on the streets of the ghetto, and my friends and I, we will collect them because they are a treasure for the future. December 5th, 1942. The ghetto is covered in snow. It's beautiful. I'm standing at the edge of the sport field. The snow is crunchy under my feet. The field is untouched, pure white and beautiful. I'm remembering standing here with my teacher, coming here to go sledding, and how free it felt to breathe the crisp, clean air of the winter, and breathing the crisp, clean air today. I feel almost free again. The sky is a mass of stars. The moon is out. It's so beautiful. The magic of winter here in the ghetto. Walking home, I pass a little girl in the street. She's trying to give change to somebody who purchased something from her, but her hands are so frozen and blue, and they shake, and her whole little body shakes that she can't count out the change. I run home as the curfew bell rings. January 8th, 1943. I have a decision to make. They've opened classes at the technical school, which means I have to decide whether to take classes at the technical school or to stay in high school and continue my studies. On the one hand, it would make a lot of sense to go to the technical school, to learn a skill, to get a job. This is an important thing in the ghetto, and I'm 15 now, and I need to grow up at some point. On the other hand, that would mean the end of my studies. I mean, right, 4 months of classes at the technical school, and then the whole point is to go get a job, to work. I'd never go back to my studies. No, no, I'm going to stay in school. If 10 out of 100 kids my age in the ghetto get to go to school, I have to be one of the lucky ones. And I have to take advantage of that opportunity. I will live for tomorrow and not with today. March 14th, 1943. The club looks different today. For one thing, it's full of people. We've put on this exhibition celebrating the Yiddish poet Yehoyash. Comrade Sutzkever introduced us to him, and we thought his poetry was so warm and so beautiful that we wanted to celebrate it. So we've created this exhibition that we hope is as warm and beautiful as the poet's poetry. Comrade Sutzkever brought over all these artifacts from YIVO. It's incredible. Newspaper clippings and handwritten letters from the poet himself, and Yiddish translations of the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, from the 17th century. I'm really proud of this exhibition. I think we've really managed to do what we wanted to do, to celebrate our Yiddish culture. And people come in and they find it such a great celebration that for a few minutes, for a little while, they forget that they're in the ghetto. I actually often forget that I'm in the ghetto because my life is so full of study and culture and friends. April 6th, 1943. It's dark in the club tonight. We sit in a circle in the dark, afraid. It's begun again. Yesterday, we got terrifying news. 85 train loads of Jews, 5,000 people who were supposed to be bound for Kovno, who got on the trains excited, happy to be going someplace new, someplace different, someplace maybe better, were instead sent to the forests of Ponar and shot. Terror, danger, death, fill the ghetto, fill the air. We have no one we can rely on. And we are terrified. But this time we will not be sent like dogs to the slaughter. We are on guard. We are ready, and we have confidence in our own strength. And that very thought relieves the difficult hours of waiting and worrying and not knowing.
Deborah, thank you so much. We'll take a deep breath. Deborah, may I appreciate you?
Yes, of course.
I'd like to start with a little quote from your story. Ghetto folklore written in blood in the streets. They are a treasure for the future. I think in Yitzkhok's words, you are bringing that treasure to life. You have told Yitskhok's story so many times before, but today was such a powerful telling. So many little new anecdotes came to life for me. I feel like I'm in a box. I've heard you say that sentence before, that quote, but today it had a different meaning. Today it was felt, it felt like the ghetto was closing in. The grandmother scene was beyond. And knowing that this comes around the same time as the yellow shins, the yellow passives, putting the history perspective together with the reality of one boy and his grandmother is a very powerful thing. It allows that history to touch. Of course, his literary club and being influenced by Sutzkever is always a joy. And the exhibition, you used the word warm, and it was warm. It came across warm. It came across Heimish, but in a different way. And then, of course, that last segment of the story, with the story of the 5,000 people on the train being sent straight to Punar. And you do say the date at the beginning, April 6, 1943. This is days before the uprising. This is days before the resistance leaves. And we will not go like dogs to the slaughter, the playoff on Abakovna. We will not go like lamb to the slaughter is subtle and yet very much in our face, which is a good thing, not in a bad way. Altogether, I found this version and this telling so engrossing and so powerful and beautiful. And thank you so much for bringing Yitskhok into everybody's consciousness now.
Thank you. Thank you. It is an honor to be able to bring him to life. And I want to thank YIVO for their new translation of the diary, because it really brought him to life in a new way that allowed me to expand the story in a different way. So it was a beautiful translation. So thank you. Which leads me to Carolina and this new exhibition, which will tell you everything you wanted to know about Yitskhok and the context in which he lived. So Carolina, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deborah. You did such an amazing job telling his story. I must say, when you read his diary, he's so serious in his writing. So to see you portraying him as like so excited about some things, it was just like I think it really brought him to life. Like as the boy he was, feeling excited about things that were happening, even though the terrible circumstances that he was living in. So thank you so much for that. Um, so I'm gonna start talking a little bit about the YIVO Children's Live Online Museum in case you're not familiar with it. So the purpose of the museum is to tell the story of Jewish life in Eastern Europe and Russia, and the way we do it is by following a character, focusing on the life of real people. So our first exhibition, like Shelley said, was based on the life of Beba Epstein, a young Jewish woman who was born in 1922 in Vilna, went through the Holocaust and was the only person in her family that survived. We previously had programs with Teach the Shoah about her story. And what we work towards in the museum is to always make the connection between our character's life and the historical context around them and how they influenced and had real consequences in their lives. So this new exhibition, as you know, is based on the life of Yitskhok Rudashevski. The basis is the diary that he wrote at the ghetto that we mentioned before. And we chose Rudashevski because of the singularity of his memoir. He focuses less on himself and more on observations of what is happening around him and does not hold back on criticism over anyone, even fellow members of the Jewish community, over what he sees as a lack of moral and ethics. He also engages in resistance through culture. You heard a little bit from the passages that Deborah talked about. And so he refuses to let the conditions they live in the ghetto to determine his choices and engages in several cultural activities in defiance of the Nazis' determinations to squash them. So that being said, I'm gonna share my screen now and do a little tour of the exhibition with you. So let me do here. Here it is. Share. All right, so this is our opening page of the exhibition, but I'm actually going to start on this one. So the storyline of the exhibition is divided into chapters, and each chapter focuses on a specific topic. You can follow the whole story from beginning to end or explore individual chapters, as all of them are full stories in themselves. And exhibitions also share chapters. So one of the chapters here, this one, the world, it's very important to show the context of the world right before World War II and is a part of both the Beba and Rudashevski exhibitions. So in here are all the chapters of the exhibitions In this one, we focus on life in the ghetto, which is an introduction about his life before the war. Just to give you a little overview, each chapter contains several levels of information that enable you to explore the content in greater depth. So the main content of each chapter is Rudashevski's story. We based it on his writings, on his diary, and expanded the historical context. Then we have what we call context boxes, like this one, which offer further information about the historical context of the time. So, for example, this is chapter 4, which chronicles the history of World War II and when the Germans finally arrive in Vilna. So here we have a passage from Rudashevski's diary where he describes the day of the invasion, and then we have a context box explaining the main idea behind the German offensive eastward. It's the idea of Lebensraum. We also explain how it is connected to Manifest Destiny in the United States and expand into the common principles between Jim Crow laws and the Nuremberg laws and how they evolve differently based on the goals of each government. We also have a selection of historical artifacts in sorry, I think I accidentally reduced my screen. There you go. And these are documents, videos, photographs, objects, songs that expand the main topic of that specific chapter, as well as always a scholar text. So, for example, here we have a couple of ghetto passes, which Rudashevski mentions in his diary, that changed constantly. We also have identifying markers like armbands, yellow stars, and other markers. Also uniforms, portraits, etc. We also have in each chapter a section called Moral Choices. In these pop-up windows, we focus on moral choices that were presented throughout his writings, which is a topic that appears throughout his diary as he contends with so many issues of ethics. Every chapter presents some passages of the exhibition and then questions for the audience to reflect upon. This chapter features what I consider to be one of the most poignant ones, which is the passage about his grandmother that Deborah presented, and how he talks about how he was filled with guilt. And we then ask the audience to try and put themselves in his shoes and think about the options he had. Let me close this one here. And on the side of every chapter, we always have a timeline, which we have here with the main historical events that were happening at the time. And apart from the year and the short description, we also have a pop-up window with a selection of news headlines from the period of time that the chapter covers. We have just the headlines, so this feature was thought of primarily for students, but it's also a great feature for the audience in general to reflect on what was going on in the world at the time and what information people had available to them, as well as any possible bias in reporting. Then we me just change here the window. Some chapters, they are more interactive, some more passive, some more shorter, some longer, and each feature was chosen based on what would be the best way to showcase the content while still keeping everyone engaged. So as a note, we always display the average time that it takes to complete a chapter here below the introduction. And I just want to show you here that in the end of every chapter, we always have a segue presenting what the main topic of the next chapter is going to be. So now I'm going to dive into everything that the exhibition has to offer. We start the exhibition with an animation. So it's an animation narrated by his cousin, Soren Voloshin, as she goes back into their Malin, their hiding place. When Vilnius is finally freed from the Nazis and finds his diary. I am going to play, it's a short one, so I'm going to play it for you here. So yeah, we got subtitles.
It is July 1944. I can finally go back to the hiding place of my family since October last year, when we were discovered and sent to the Gestapo prison. I was the only one who managed to escape and survive. I'm back at the ghetto, the place where so much suffering took place. This was when he read his essay at his teacher's memorial service. I'm finally here. Our hiding place. Will there be anything left? Without a ladder and with great difficulty, I lift myself up. Could it have survived? On each and every page, I saw before me what had happened to us. All that has taken place. The great suffering. I keep reading, and he stands before me. Here he is tidying up the house. And here is at lessons at school. Out in the street with his pals. I cannot think anymore. I now see only a corner of the attic where he sat and read a book, still and silent, speaking only infrequently.
Right. So in this chapter here, in the artifacts, this is where we feature his diary. So I have it open here. We have the full original diary in Yiddish, but we also, when you click here, we have the full English translation that we commissioned for this exhibition available in a PDF. So if you want to print it out and read, it's very easy to do so or read in your devices. Another interesting artifact that we have in this chapter, it's this one here. I'm gonna play as I speak. So this is a drone footage, a photo of their Malin, their hiding place, which is still up and shut in Vilnius. This was found by Dr. Mindaugas Kivijakauskas, a Lithuanian scholar who published a translation of Rudashevski's diary into Lithuanian and is one of the co-curators of this exhibition. We can see here in this video a covered residual area. If you can see my, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's this area here in between these three buildings. And we believe this to have been the place Rudashevski and other 10 people were hiding, and no one has entered it since World War II. So there might be something in there or not. So moving on into the next chapter. So this chapter is an introduction to Yitskhok's life. We begin talking about his connection with his city, Vilna. And also we talk a little bit about Jewish life in Vilna at the time. And we also talk about his school, which is part 2. And we have some letters from Rudashevski here, as his class was exchanging correspondence with the writer Manny Leib, and we translated them. We also have this video. It's part of our first exhibition about Baba Epstein, where we had I was Baba's teacher, read books for the classroom. One of them was by Manny Leib, and it's super interesting if you want to check it out later. We also have a section about his father's work, which had a big influence on his outlook on life. I think this is very interesting because before the war, his father's job and affiliations were very important in forming his character. However, in the ghetto, it's the fact that his mother has a job that keeps all of the family alive. Then in part 4, we end this in the end of this chapter, we can already see the war looming from the essays written at school by his classmates. So he was in Vilna, which means that the Nazis did not enter the city until 1941. So they knew of the events that were going on in the rest of Poland, from refugees and news that were coming to the city. So many people kept their hopes up. So these are all essays of students saying, how do I imagine myself in a year from now? They were written in June 1940. So we have like the super optimistic ones, the super pessimistic ones. And what we call a realistic one, he's like, the war is probably gonna come and I'm still gonna be here. Then our next chapter is chapter 3. This is the shared experience between Baba and Rudashevski. So this chapter gives an overview of what was going on in the world in the second half of the 1930s. So it's interactive, it's a globe, you can zoom in, you can turn it around, and we have a selection of countries all over the world where we talk about what was going on at the time in those places. So we feature, obviously, we have Germany, we talk about the Hitler's rise to power, we talk a bit about the Nuremberg laws. And both here and in France, we talk about the Evian conference and its importance in allowing the Germans to pursue the final solution. We also have the United States as well. Essentially, the main conclusion is that the majority of the countries around the world had their doors closed to immigration following the Great Depression, with only 2 notable exceptions, which were the Dominican Republic, that was the only country to accept refugees in the Evian Conference, and China. So then we move into chapter 4, and this is where we dive into the war itself. And this is when Rudashevski starts writing his diary. It is divided into 3 parts following different moments in the war. We explain the establishment of the ghetto, all the different forces at play, the change of Vilnius from Poland to Lithuania, and the background context to all these issues. Rudashevski was a communist, so we also take some time to discuss affiliations of Jews and communism and anti-Semitic tropes spread by Nazis at the time. So here we talk a little bit about anti-Semitism in Lithuania, and we also have a context box about the anti-Semitic tropes. The events in this chapter cover the period until December 1941, when everything happened very fast and many Jews were killed. It was hectic, and they really didn't know who or when would be next. And after that began what we call the quiet period, where things settled down and Jews were able to organize their lives and routines inside the ghetto. This is the topic of the next chapter. And this is really where we can focus on the cultural resistance activities undertaken in the ghetto. We organize this chapter in 4 sections, each featuring a different type of experience. So the first one that we are calling environment is where we transform some passages from his diary into a graphic novel. Here some of the passages that Deborah used in her story are here. For example, when they were entering the ghetto, he calls it an image from the Middle Ages. And the sun, as if ashamed of what people are doing, let the sky cloud over. We have a set of sections that we chose, and we asked the graphic artist to transform them into a graphic novel. Then we have this chapter here called Culture and Relationships. And this is a selection of artifacts pertaining to several activities that Yitskhok mentions in his diary. So the youth club, again, that Deborah talked about, schools in the ghetto, clubs and mentorship, exhibitions and cultural programs, the ghetto library. I'm going to highlight now the ghetto records. One, Rudashevski was involved in a research led by intellectuals to record everything they could for posterity. They had a questionnaire that they used to interview people at the ghetto. This is the questionnaire without answers. And Rudashevski was one of the students who worked on it. So they got students to just walk around with the questionnaires and get answers from people. We feature some artifacts related to it here, some accounts that were collected. This is a list of materials that they were able to collect for the research. Then we have the exhibition about the writer YIVO that Deborah also mentions. And here we have a few of the items that were actually featured at the exhibition. So this is the actual poster advertising the celebration in the ghetto. This is one of the letters that was featured in the exhibition itself that we know was there. We also have some other materials pertaining to this writer and telling a bit about who he was. Our next section here is called Moral and Ethical Dilemmas. So these are entries from Rudashevski's diary where he reflects about moral and ethical dilemmas in the ghetto. He describes scenes of corruption from those who should be allies and describes what he observed about moments of weakness that exemplify the human condition. They're presented as animations. I'm going to play one of them for you. It's not very long. Let me just see if we have subtitles. Okay.
Today, they give 5 decagrams of pork on the ration cards. I waited in line a short time and at last found myself inside the store. There is so much injustice evident among the Jews in the ghetto, so much that is not right, so much that is disgusting. For instance, in the distribution of meat on the ration cards, people freeze and stand in line. Policemen, privileged persons, walk in freely. During the distribution, the butcher throws the piece of meat to the person in line as if he were doing him a favor, exploiting a child, a person who is less vituperative, giving him the worst. On the other hand, those who have pull with the butcher, for pull, the ghetto person lowers himself into the merest nonentity, because in the ghetto, the vitamin P, as it is called, is victorious. Pull, in other words, strong shoulders, get a somewhat fatter piece. The butcher extends his sweet, wheedling face to them in such a disgusting manner, cuts out a piece of thick white fat for them. I think that they have enough even without that at home. The crowd of frozen women stand in line, hushed, wrathful, devouring the meat table with their eyes. They remain silent as they watch one person receive the fat and the second bones. People are already used to it.
All right. And finally, we have a section with selections of passages of his diary where he focuses on himself, his reflections, and for those we chose to hire an actor and dramatize these passages. For the sake of time, I'm not going to play any one of them, especially because Deborah already presented the one about the school choice. But you're obviously free to come and see more later. The next chapter features the last moments of both the war and Rudashevski. They were found and murdered in October, but his final diary entry is from April 1943, and it features an ominous quote. It says, "At any moment, the worst can happen to us." One of the notable issues that we bring in this chapter is we know Rudashevsky was not into any concentration camps, but we do feel it's important to talk a little bit um, about them. And we bring a little bit of history about concentration camps and how Imperial Germany had used the same strategy earlier in the 20th century, the genocide of the Nama and Herero peoples in Namibia. So this leads us into our final chapter, which is a timeline of the path of the diary itself and the aftermath of the Holocaust. We start with source survival with partisans in the forest. Then she gives the diary to Avram Sutzkever, as we said, who sends it to YIVO, and later Sutzkever is the first to publish it. So yeah, and then we go all the way to the launch of the exhibition in 2024. So that is it for me. Thank you so much. And I'm going to leave the link here in the chat for you to visit later.
Thank you so much, Carolina. That is an amazing exhibition, and I'm excited to see the things about the Yehoyash exhibition in there that I was talking about. All I did most of my work from the diary more than the exhibition, and it's neat to see the things reflected in the exhibition.
Yeah, no, it's great. We have so much stuff about the youth clubs as well. It's so nice that we were so happy that we were able to find artifacts to really show the things that he's talking about.
Yes, yeah, it's an amazing exhibition. So at this point, we have some time for some questions and answers. Lynn, Shelley, if you want to come join us, we can open the floor to some questions and answers. I actually have a question for Shelley, because I've never quite understood how. Maybe Carolina, you can answer this. How did YIVO survive this? It amazes me that YIVO survived.
Yeah, I can explain a bit of that. So what happened was, during the war, the Nazis sent a group from the SS unit they wanted to not just destroy the Jewish people, they wanted to destroy our material culture as well. So they sent a group to YIVO to basically loot YIVO as well as other Jewish materials in Vilna at the time. And when they got there, they couldn't work out heads or tails of the material. So they put together a slave labor group, which from the Vilna ghetto, which were mainly academics, scholars, and people that had either worked for or been affiliated with YIVO. And what they kind of wanted to do is they wanted to destroy most of the material, and then they wanted to take some of it, sort through some of it, because they were creating a institution in Germany, in Frankfurt. It was on an institution about the Jewish question. I suppose they thought they were going to wipe out the Jews and they would have like a museum on the dinosaurs. You know what I mean? As an extinct rate. So they wanted to go through the materials and sort out what they wanted to take for that institute and then what they wanted to destroy. And there was a group from that slave labor group, about 36, that became known as the Paper Brigade, of which Abraham Sutzkever and Shmerta Kaczynski were part of. And they said, we can't bear that either the material should be taken to Frankfurt or for it to be destroyed. So they hid it on their bodies and smuggled it back in to the Vilna ghetto and hid it there, or gave it to some of their non-Jewish people in Lithuania to go and hide. And people would say, we understand you risking your lives for a potato or a piece of bread, but why are you doing it for material, these materials? And there's been a book written about it by David Fishman called The Book Smugglers. And one of the women who ended up surviving was asked, why did you do it? Why did you risk your life for that? And she said, well, I thought I was going to be dead anyway, and I wanted to have something for the next generation. And it just shows that even in the worst of times, they still believed in Jewish continuity. They still believed that despite what they were seeing in front of them, that there would be a next generation. So they would hide things they'd make diapers and around their bodies. Can you imagine one guy put a Torah scroll around his body and smuggled back into the Vilna ghetto? So after the war, I believe that this material had a will of its own to survive. After the war, so it survived. After the war, the Jews, so basically a third of the pre-war archive was completely destroyed, roughly a third taken to Frankfurt, and a third buried, saved. After the war, the Jews that had survived went back to uncover this material. They wanted to create a museum, and they smuggled some of it out of Vilna, and then the rest they wanted to smuggle a museum. But then the Russians took over, the Soviets, and they didn't want any of this Jewish material to survive. So they took it to a pulping mill to destroy it. But then there was this Lithuanian librarian called Tanas Ulpis. Now, he wasn't Jewish and he didn't kind of know what the material was, but he understood that it was precious material. So then he risked his life and he took it from the Soviets and he hid it in a church of all places in Vilna. And YIVO later gave him an award posthumously for saving it. And his son accepted it and he said, my father would take me to the church every Sunday, and when I went to play the organ, no sound would come out. And my father said, have a look underneath. And there was all this Jewish material stuffed into this organ in this church in Vilna. So with the fall of communism, long story, the material became known, it was uncovered, and then there was a bit of a tussle between YIVO and the Lithuanian government because YIVO wanted it back. And the Lithuanian government said, we didn't steal it. It was created here. And there was no clear-cut international law which deciphered what was. And I should go back and say the material that was taken to Frankfurt, has anyone heard of the Monument Men? It was a group, there was a film about it with George Clooney. It was a group put together by the US Army and I think the Library of Congress to go and retrieve the stolen art taken by the Nazis across Europe. And would you believe they stumbled across all this YIVO material in Frankfurt and they sent it to New York because YIVO by this time had relocated to New York. Really, YIVO always had a friends of happening in New York. What had happened is one of the founders, Max Weinreich, when the Nazis invaded, he was fortunately, I think it was in Switzerland or Sweden, giving a conference. He was in another Europe.
I think it was Denmark.
Denmark.
Anyways, he was, yeah.
Yeah, he was out of Vilna. He was there, probably Denmark, I'm sorry, giving a conference, or he's there to participate in a conference, and they said, don't come back. So he went from there to the US. He survived, and then the New York came the headquarters. But this pre-war archive, so this material found by the Monument Men was sent back to New York, and then you have this split archive in Lithuania. What ultimately happened in 2014 was the beginning of a project to digitally unite it. So they couldn't decide, they weren't going to decide, okay, it's going to New York. It stayed in Vilnius. The material that we had stayed in New York. We raised $7 million, 7 years. We worked with organizations in Lithuania, 3 organizations there, and we all conserved it, digitized it, and it's digitally, this pre-war archive is digitally reunited. And I suppose, the founder, one of the founders, Max Weinreich, ended up being, as Carolina said, in Denmark, and he didn't go back. And once YIVO came to New York, they just continued collecting. So So that's a very long answer to a short question, but it
Did,
provides
did
you
I see, that's really cool. Did I see when I looked at the exhibition that it's in English and Lithuanian?
So
Yes,
we have
yeah.
Beba in Lithuanian and English, and we are now translating Rudashevski into Lithuanian as well, both times with the support of the Lithuanian government.
And I should add to that we have set up a teacher training program that's going to happen in Lithuania in June, where Carolina will participate by Zoom, but Jonathan and I, the CEO of YIVO, we're going to go to Lithuania and we're going to help teachers learn how to use the online museum in their classroom. So that's really monumental because you're going to have a whole lot of Lithuanian schools, not Jewish schools, learn about the Holocaust through this mechanism, through this online museum that you're looking at as well now.
Wow, that's amazing. So
and I should
It
just
is,
say
yeah.
something else, just
Yeah,
one other
go
thing,
ahead.
and I don't know, Caroline, if you can get the link. Obviously, you can get the translation of the online of Yitskok's diary from our website. Okay, I'll answer that one in a minute. You can get it from our website, but there also is a magazine called JQ, Jewish Quarterly. And what they did is I know the publisher, and he was so moved by Yitskok's diary that he dedicated one edition to just fully translate, to use our translation. And then as the introduction, there's an introduction by Sam Cassow, who he sets out we're selling it in the YIVO shop. Caroline, are you about to include the link to that?
Yeah, I'm getting it here now.
Yeah, so you can buy it online. Obviously, you can get it from the online museum, but if you want a hard copy with that thing, you can get it on Jewish Quarterly.
Yeah, I'm getting here the link if you want to have the
Copy.
physical
Sorry,
copy.
Deborah, what
Yeah.
was your question? You asked.
Actually, there's a question in the chat I want to come back to, but before I do, somebody asked, what about teacher training in the US? So
Well, that's what we're trying to do with you guys. I mean, Carolina mainly does it. I gave a little introduction in the beginning, but we are trying, and if there's anyone on this group, that we're trying to work with organizations, peak bodies, like Teach the Shoah, like Carolina, what are some of the other ones?
So we've had many teacher trainings already. We recently had with the Echoes and Reflections. We had with the Illinois Holocaust Museum. We had for Beba, we had so many, even with the United Nations. But we are always having those sessions. We always put them up on YIVO's newsletter whenever we have them available. So following the YIVO newsletter is a good way to know when they're happening. But we also have teaching resources, and I'm leaving here the page. This is actually, I think, for Beba. Sorry, it's the wrong one. But I am going to give you here now the teaching resources page for Rudashevski, where we have teacher guides and activities and a lot of resources. But the best way, if you know anyone, we're always open to connect us so that we can have more teacher trainings. But also, you can always find information here and on YIVO's newsletter whenever we have one coming up.
Do you have recordings of them on your website?
So not on our website, because we usually do them with partner institutions. So I know that all of them record, like the Illinois Holocaust Museum, they recorded their session. I don't know how to be able to access it. I know Echoes and Reflections always record them as well. So, but yeah, we highly recommend following the newsletter for any upcoming ones.
Very nice.
Or again, Carolina said, if there's any other organizations or any schools, we're always happy to do them.
Awesome. So there's an interesting question in the chat about the diary. Alexandra asked, when was it first translated into English? And was there ever a point when it was censored because of his Soviet views or other communist views and the like that he had that were problematic?
Yes, actually, Avram Sutzkever was the one that censored the diary for his Soviet views. He first published it in Yiddish in 1953 in his periodical in Israel. He went to live in Israel then. So he cut out everything. I think it was right at the time that everything was happening. So he thought that this was the best way to deal with it. So he made a transcription in Yiddish, cutting out these parts. The interesting thing is that there is no transcription, Yiddish transcription from the original without this redacted version. That is not the redacted version from Sutzkever. So the only available full version is his handwritten one that we have on our website translated. That being said, it was translated into English in the 70s by the Ghetto Fighters Museum in Israel, and that version is not redacted. That is the full original. So the first English translation was a complete one. And then we commissioned a new one because there were the scholars we worked with, they believed that the first translation into English was a bit, there were some stylistic liberties that were taken, but the content is the same, and that's why we commissioned a new translation for the exhibition.
That's neat. That's really interesting that way back in the beginning, Sutzkever actually.
Yeah, he's the one who redacted it. He was the only one who redacted. Then in the 70s, I don't know exactly, I think it was 73 when it was translated into English. It was the full version with everything.
So was Sutzkever not a communist then, or was he just responding to the milieu?
I think he was just responding to what was going on, because really Sutzkever was saved by the Soviets. So there was an airplane that was sent. He was hiding in the forest with his wife, and there was an airplane that was sent from Moscow just to pick him up, just to pick them up and take them to safety. So yeah, I think he was a communist, but then, I think it's because when he published it, it was really when persecution to Jews in the Soviet Union was really like its highest. It was exactly when everything was happening. So I think that's why he did that. I think maybe he was afraid of what could happen to people he knew, perhaps, in the Soviet Union, that when they heard about it, this was probably why he moved from the Soviet Union to Israel as well. So I think it's mainly because this is when everything was happening that he did this.
So from other diaries that were written at the time and from Sutzkever's own writings, he does not identify himself as a communist, but saying that, as Carolina said, he was rescued. He and his wife were taken right in the middle of the partisan fighting. A plane comes, takes them away. But when he gets to Moscow, he is asked to write black pages. He's asked to write by the Soviets the history of the Vilna Ghetto. And I think out of trying to keep the same line of his original published work, he didn't want to veer off. But funnily enough, the Hebrew version of the diary was translated in full. And this was after Sutzkever already came to Israel. There was no censorship on that. So it was only what the Russians could read that I think was censored.
Right. All right. Well,
it's so sensitive. It's so sensitive, even to today. You know what it is. I mean, I can tell you that we were looking to do an award in the name of Atanas Upis, the one that saved the materials. And he was connected to the Soviets. But that is so difficult for the Lithuanians to hear at the moment, to have any award, because, and even Mindaugas, who translated into Lithuanian, who Carolina talked about, he said it's lucky it happened, he published it before Russia invaded Ukraine, because obviously in Lithuania they're so nervous about it because they see themselves as potentially next, the Baltics. So he said if he would have translated, and published it before the war, it would have been problematic, because in that book he keeps seeing the Soviets as his saviors. Yes. And he said that wouldn't have gone down well. At the moment.
Yeah. I mean, for the audience who hasn't read the diary, Yitskhok is a real communist. His beloved Red Army, he says, then he believes that they will come save him, and he's waiting for the Red Army to come save him. And so, yeah, there's a lot of very positive thoughts towards the Soviet Union all throughout the diary. And yeah, I can see how it could be.
But also, I mean, he didn't see what happened afterwards. You know,
Right.
all he had was what had happened until that moment, and he could never know like what was gonna come down.
Right, right. I mean, who knows what he would have been like afterwards. But you know, the communist times just before, where the Soviets were in charge, just before the Nazis, or times that he was happy, I guess. I mean, he was what, 12, 13? So you know, as a preteen, you don't always see the bigger picture. He was part of the young pioneers and the, you know, young communist kinds of things, and you don't necessarily always see even then the big picture at that age. How was his relationship with the Lithuanians?
He doesn't talk a lot about the Lithuanians in his diary. What he talks most are about the the Soviets, but mainly the diary was written when he was in the ghetto, so there wasn't any Lithuanians in the ghetto. He does talk about the Lithuanians that collaborate with the Nazis. Those are the ones that he had contact with at the ghetto, and um, and you know, they received news about what was going on in the war, and he was fully expecting the arrival of the Soviet army. And the only other thing that I think gives an idea of his relationship to Lithuanians is that when Vilna was taken over by the Nazis right after the Soviets come in, and then he talks about how never was life as happy and carefree as the Soviet summer of 1941. And if you talk to Lithuanians, that was like, oh my God, that is the worst moment of our lives. That's the moment that the Soviets came into Lithuania. So he was, I think, in a very different point of view from the Lithuanians. I don't know if they had much contact at all. He went to Jewish schools. His father worked in the Jewish newspaper, so I think he kind of lived in the Jewish bubble of Vilna. But we do talk a little bit about how hard in the exhibition it was for the Lithuanians when the Soviets came in, and how they negotiated being part of the Soviet Union so that they could have Vilnius back from Poland. But yeah, the only time he talks about Lithuanians is really about the collaborators, which in Eastern Europe, a lot of the local population were the ones who carried out the Nazis' orders.
I'd like to just add on to what you just said, Carolina, is also the fact that pre-war, pre-1939, Vilna is Yerushalayim Delita. It is one of the biggest Jewish centers in Eastern Europe. And children of his age, so he would have then been under 10, right? As you said, would be living in a bubble. What would they know? They know the Jews around them.
Yeah.
And then the first encounter with the Soviets, for some of the Jews in Vilna, was good. And for some, it was very bad. It depended on what your political view was at the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, and also,
yeah.
I mean, Vilna was in Poland at the time. He wasn't in Lithuania when he was growing up. It was Poland. So the Lithuanians were a minority of the population. There were less Lithuanians than Jews in Vilna at the time. It was a smaller subset of the population. So really, um, I think it would have been very difficult even for him to have a lot of contact with Lithuanians. He would have had more contact with Poles than Lithuanians.
Yeah, for sure.
But in broader Lithuania, I mean, I was just watching Simon Sharma's documentary on 80 years from Auschwitz, and also what we know. I mean, the Lithuanians we had one scholar that would say to us, you know, in Poland, the Poles helped the Nazis. In Lithuania, the Nazis helped the Lithuanians. You know, I mean, they were really up there. I mean, they were all, in terms of their role, even before the Nazis came.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been a
Oh, there's another question there. Any plans to feature more teenage stories? Actually, we don't have any plans to do that now, but we do have a part of his friend Gabby Keller as an artifact in the exhibition, and I am going to add this here now. If you want to take a look, it's just a short excerpt, but it's interesting. And one thing that we found very interesting was that his writings, Yitzhak's writings, they're very some people talk about how dry it is, but his friend, Gabby Keller, was even more, direct to the point and even more than he was. I'm gonna find it and I'm gonna add it here for those who are interested.
One of the versions of the diary that I read suggested that the early part was written later, and it definitely feels like that. Was the diary a school assignment? Something that they were
I don't
asked to do
think,
by
I
school?
don't know. We
No.
have no idea, but I don't think so. We can't say yes or no. I don't think it is. But yeah, we also can't say for sure if it was written, the beginning was written after the fact or not. But some people suggest that, but no definitive findings.
So unless there are more questions in the chat, one last question for you guys. When we did Beba, you were already talking about Yitzhak. Do you have plans for the next museum, and what would that be?
Charlie, I don't know. Can we?
You
I
can
don't think so,
definitely
right?
say it. Yes,
I
you
can?
can. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are working on an exhibition about Marc Chagall. Yeah, it's
Who
very
had a
exciting.
very big connection with YIVO. So it's not, the first two have been Holocaust related, and this one is different.
Yeah, but he had a lot of connections. He agreed to be a board member in the early years of YIVO. There was a plan from YIVO to have an art museum that never came into being, but he was involved in that. And he actually his writings about his life and Jewish culture, they really came to being after he attended a YIVO conference. So a lot of his literary work really derives from this connection. So we are really, the idea is to focus on his connection to his culture, to Jewish culture, and his life and in Belarus.
Wow, that should be really exciting. So we're looking forward to that. I'm gonna go back to my slides just briefly. This is so on behalf of the entire Teach the Shoah team, myself, Lynn, we have many wonderful storytellers. If you are not one of our storytellers, come join us. We have storytelling training regularly, and be on our mailing list, which you should be now that you've been here. And finally, not finally, we have an upcoming program on the 12th of May. We're going to be featuring storyteller Leora Lazarus, telling a story of somebody from her family. She tells a whole bunch of her family stories. She's a wonderful storyteller. I will be facilitating that. So please join us then. And on behalf of Teach the Shoah and YIVO, thank you for being here.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.